The sterile scent of disinfectant, acrid and metallic, clawed at my throat. It was a smell I knew too well from a lifetime of incidental visits, but today it felt like a suffocating blanket. My sensible brogues, usually so reliable, hammered a desperate rhythm against the hospital's polished linoleum, a hollow echo that swallowed itself in the vast, silent corridors. Each frantic stride sent a jolt through my 66-year-old body, a body that suddenly felt ancient, frail, and utterly inconsequential. My heart, a wild drum in my chest, throbbed in my temples, a frantic pulse in my neck, in every tremor of my hands clutching my worn leather handbag. Just 40 minutes. 40 minutes since the phone had rung, since the world had tilted on its axis with those chilling words. Callum, emergency admission. Callum, my son, my only child, the architect of my joy, the anchor of my existence. A single panicked syllable had shattered my peaceful evening, sending me hurtling into this labyrinth of dread. I hadn't stopped shaking since. My gaze darted, blurring over door plaques, each number a cruel tease in my frantic search. 308, 310. Close. So close. I rounded another corner, my breath catching in my throat. Hope, a fragile, trembling bird, fluttered in my chest. Soon I would see him. I would hold his hand, stroke his brow, and whisper the oldest, most powerful mantra a mother knows. Everything will be all right. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We mend the broken, soothe the aching, pour every drop of ourselves into our children, expecting nothing in return. And I, Evelyn Albright, had given so much that sometimes, in quiet moments, I wondered if there was anything left of myself beneath the accumulated layers of sacrifice and unwavering devotion. But now, none of that mattered. Only Callum. Only reaching his room, understanding what fresh hell had unfolded. The phone had vibrated on the kitchen counter, interrupting the gentle simmer of a bolognese sauce. I dropped the spoon, a clatter swallowed by the sudden chill of Serafina's voice. Callum's in the hospital. An accident. Come if you care. And then, an abrupt click. No details. No hint of the severity, the nature of the accident, whether he was conscious. Just those sharp, dismissive words, delivered with the same cool disdain she always reserved for me, as if my very existence were an inconvenience in her meticulously curated life with my son. But there was no time to dwell on Serafina's icy tone, or the years of subtle slights that had chipped away at my spirit. 311. Almost there. My hands trembled as I smoothed the lapels of my sensible wool coat, willing my ragged breaths to steady. I had to be strong for Callum. I had to be the steadfast mother I had always been, the one who never faltered, never failed. The one who was always there, even when unseen, unthanked, unacknowledged. It was then that it happened. A firm hand, surprisingly strong, clamped onto my arm, pulling me sharply into a recessed alcove. A gasp hitched in my throat, quickly stifled by another, softer hand placed gently over my mouth. Hide. Wait. Trust me. The whispered words, urgent and low, were laced with a medicinal scent, a familiar fragrance of hospital soap. I glimpsed the crisp white of a uniform, the stark blue of a scrub top. A nurse. Her face, etched with a serious intensity, was framed by a severe bun of dark hair. Her eyes, deep-set and piercing, gleamed with a strange, unsettling light. Without a word, she propelled me, carefully but firmly, towards the half-open door of room 311, the room directly adjacent to Callum's. Don't make a sound. Don't come out. Observe, listen. You'll understand everything. Later. Before I could react, before I could articulate the frantic questions swirling in my mind, she was gone. Her shoes made the same rhythmic thwack thwack against the linoleum as she strode quickly down the corridor. I remained, a statuesque figure of fear, paralyzed behind that door, my heart now beating for entirely new, terrifying reasons. It was no longer just fear for Callum's life. It was something else. Something dark and heavy, a premonition of malice I couldn't yet name, but that prickled the hairs on my arms. The room was empty, shadowed, smelling of clean sheets and the artificial throat-drying chill of air conditioning. I leaned against the cold wall, my mind reeling, struggling to process the bizarre encounter. Why would a stranger hide me like this? Was I in danger? The thought was absurd. Me? But the urgency in her voice, the unyielding directness in her gaze, it held me captive. "Trust me," she had said, and for some inexplicable reason, in that moment of absolute desperation, I did. Perhaps it was the sheer shock, the overwhelming sense of helplessness that made any outstretched hand feel like a lifeline. Or perhaps, after so many years of feeling invisible, ignored, finally someone was seeing me, protecting me. Though from what, I still had no idea. This was the precipice, I realized, the edge of a chasm I was about to fall into, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the life I had known was about to shatter irrevocably. The promise hung heavy in the air. "You'll understand everything later." My son, Callum. He was 42 now, but in my mind, he was still the boy with endless curiosity, the one who'd built magnificent castles out of building blocks, who'd chased after every stray ball with unbridled joy. He was the spitting image of his father, Alistair, my late husband, a kind, hard-working man who'd left me too soon, a sudden heart attack snatching him away at 58. Alistair had been my rock, my confidant, the one person who truly saw me, valued my contributions, cherished my love. His passing had left a gaping void, but also a legacy, a modest inheritance, carefully managed, intended to secure my twilight years. That inheritance, a nest egg for my future, had been the foundation of Callum's success. After Alistair passed, Callum, then a bright-eyed, ambitious 35-year-old, had come to me with a dream, an import-export company specializing in high-end European textiles. He was passionate, articulate, his eyes alight with entrepreneurial zeal. "Mum," he'd pleaded, "this is it. This is the opportunity to build something incredible, something for our future. I just need a jump start, a significant investment." I hadn't hesitated. The house, our beautiful 3-bedroom bungalow, with the sprawling rose garden that Alistair had cultivated with such pride, had been fully paid off. It was the only tangible asset from his inheritance. I sold it, moving into a smaller 2-bedroom apartment that, while perfectly adequate, felt stark and lonely after the warmth of our family home. The entire sum, a substantial £180,000, I entrusted to Callum. "It's for your future, my darling," I'd told him. "And through you, my own. Just put the house in your name, for simplicity. I trust you implicitly." He'd enveloped me in a tight hug, promising the moon and the stars, swearing he'd make me proud, assuring me the investment was sound, that my future was secure within his thriving enterprise. I believed him, implicitly. He was my son, my everything. The business, Albright Global Textiles, had indeed thrived. The European designs, the quality fabrics. It was a niche market Callum had captured brilliantly. Soon, the company was flourishing, contracts pouring in, profits steadily climbing. My initial investment, plus another £200,000 I'd loaned him from other savings for expansion, had grown exponentially. I'd seen the bank statements, the rising figures. He'd occasionally say, "Mum, it's an investment in our future. You'll get it back when the business grows." And it had grown. Yet I still found myself clipping coupons, turning off lights to save on the electricity bill, wearing the same winter coat I'd owned for 5 years. My small apartment felt increasingly confined, echoing with the silence of my diminished life. Meanwhile, Callum and Serafina lived a life of opulent comfort in a sprawling house with a manicured garden and a sparkling swimming pool. A property, I learned later, that had been purchased largely with the profits from the business, yet was legally in Callum's name. Serafina, with her elegant designer handbags that cost more than my 3 months' rent, her quarterly European holidays, her habit of changing luxury cars every 2 years as if they were seasonal accessories. She embodied an effortless glamour that had always felt alien to my more understated, practical nature. 7 years ago, Callum had introduced me to Serafina. She was radiant, captivating, with a cascade of glossy brown hair and striking emerald eyes. "Mum, this is Serafina. She's wonderful." I had seen the light in Callum's eyes, a light I hadn't seen since his father's passing. My heart, eager for his happiness, had embraced her. I tried. Truly I did. I swallowed countless thinly veiled criticisms of my cooking, my clothes, my old-fashioned opinions. I smiled through awkward family dinners, where I was often relegated to the kitchen, clearing dishes while she held court with Callum in the lavish living room. I bought her thoughtful, expensive gifts for birthdays and Christmas, gifts she'd barely glance at before setting aside, a mumbled, "Thank you," lost in the air. I looked after their house when they travelled, watering her exotic orchids, collecting their mail, dusting their pristine, designer-furnished rooms. I was the perfect mother-in-law, the one who never interfered, never offered unsolicited advice, who gave and gave and gave, asking for nothing in return. Because Callum was happy, and seeing him happy truly was the only thing that mattered to me. But over the past 3 years, a subtle shift had occurred. Callum, once so open and affectionate, grew distant. His calls became fewer, his visits sparse. Lunches were cancelled, my birthdays occasionally forgotten amidst his demanding schedule. He'd seem irritable, sharp, if I ever offered a helping hand or ventured an opinion. "Mum, I'm not a child anymore. I can solve my own problems," he'd retort, his voice laced with a frustration I couldn't comprehend. I attributed it to stress, to the relentless pressures of running a thriving business, to the natural evolution of an adult son carving out his own family. Never, in my wildest imaginings, did I suspect it was something more insidious, something far, far darker. I just continued to give, to hope, to be there, patiently waiting for the pendulum to swing back, for my son to remember the depth of our connection. The first crack in my carefully constructed reality had come with Serafina's phone call. I was stirring the rich, fragrant bolognese sauce, the comforting scent of garlic and tomatoes filling my small kitchen, when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was Serafina. A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. She rarely called unless it was for a specific, often logistical reason. "Evelyn," her voice, usually smooth and modulated, was oddly flat, devoid of its usual saccharine charm. "Callum's in the hospital. An accident." The spoon clattered into the pot, splashing sauce onto the pristine white tiles. "What? An accident? Serafina, what happened? Is he—" "I don't have all the details," she cut me off, her tone brisk, dismissive. "They said emergency admission. Room 312, St. Jude's. Come if you—" If you care. And then a click. The line went dead. My hand, trembling, dropped the phone onto the counter. An accident. St. Jude's. Callum. My mind raced, snatching at fragments. What kind of accident? A car crash? A fall? How serious was it? Was he conscious? Hurt? The questions battered at me, a relentless wave of panic. Serafina's coldness, her utter lack of empathy, stung, but it was overshadowed by a primal terror. My son. My only son. I grabbed my coat, my handbag, fumbling with the keys, my vision blurring with unshed tears. The bus ride felt interminable, each jolt and stop amplifying my anxiety. My throat burned with the effort to suppress a sob. I prayed, a silent, fervent prayer to Alistair, to any higher power that might be listening. Please, let him be okay, please. As I entered the cavernous, antiseptic lobby of St. Jude's, the weight of the moment pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. The cold, impersonal environment, the hushed voices, the fleeting glimpses of worried faces, it all coalesced into a potent brew of fear. I remember the frantic scramble down the hallway, the echo of my shoes, the burning disinfectant. My heart hammered, an irregular, painful rhythm against my ribs. I felt every one of my 66 years, and then some. My body felt like 1,000. 312. Room 312. The numbers on the doors swam before my eyes. 308. 310. Almost there. A desperate, almost delirious hope surged through me. I could see him. I could touch him. I could tell him, just like I had done his whole life, that his mother was here, and everything would be all right. Because that's what mothers do. We fix what's broken. We heal what hurts. We give everything, absolutely everything, expecting nothing in return. And I had given so much that sometimes I wondered if there was anything left of myself underneath all those layers of sacrifice. But at that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was reaching that room, seeing my son, knowing what had happened. Serafina's cold voice, the casual dismissal of my maternal agony, faded into the background, replaced by the desperate need to protect Callum, to cradle him in my love, to absorb his pain. This was my role, my sacred duty. And as I lunged toward room 312, fully prepared to play that role, I was oblivious to the true, monstrous injustice that was about to unfold, not just for Callum, but for me. The injustice of being dismissed, overlooked, and utterly underestimated. My breath hitched, a strangled sound that died in my throat as I was abruptly pulled aside. The nurse's hand was firm, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman of her lean build. Hide. Wait. Trust me. The words were clipped, urgent, barely audible over the sudden rush of blood in my ears. The scent of medicinal soap, mixed with the faint, comforting aroma of lavender from her uniform, momentarily disoriented me. She propelled me into the adjacent room, 311, its door ajar. The room was dark, a sliver of light from the hallway illuminating an empty bed, its sheets pristine and taut. An IV pole stood sentinel, a metallic skeleton against the shadowed wall. The nurse, her face a mask of determined gravity, knelt before me, her dark eyes glittering with an intensity that held me captive. Don't make a sound. Don't come out. Observe and listen. You'll understand everything later. Before I could voice a single question, she was gone, her footsteps receding down the corridor. I stood there, a frozen tableau of confusion and fear. My heart, a frantic hummingbird, hammered against my ribs. What in God's name was happening? Why was I hiding? Was Callum truly in danger, beyond the accident? The empty room offered no answers, only a stale, artificial chill that raised goosebumps on my arms. I leaned against the cold wall, my mind scrambling, trying to reconcile the nurse's urgent plea with the mundane reality of a hospital corridor. "Trust me," she had said, and for reasons I couldn't fathom, a deep, instinctual part of me did. Perhaps it was the desperate hope she offered, a flicker of agency in a moment of utter helplessness. Perhaps, after years of feeling unseen, her direct protective gaze was a stark, compelling contrast. Barely a minute passed, though it stretched into an eternity. Then I heard them. Voices. Seraphina's, unmistakable, with that cloying sweetness she reserved for moments when she wanted something, or needed to project an image. And another, masculine, unfamiliar, formal. They stopped directly in front of room 312, Callum's room, right across from my hiding place. My body tensed, every muscle rigid, my breath catching in my chest. "Are you sure no one will see us here?" the man asked, his voice low, cautious. Seraphina let out a short, dry laugh, a brittle sound like dead leaves rustling. "The old woman is on her way, but she'll still take a while. The guards don't let just anyone through that fast. We have plenty of time, old woman." The words struck me like a physical blow, a tightening in my chest, as if an invisible hand was squeezing my heart. But the shock of the insult was quickly overshadowed by a chilling realization. They were talking about me, and they didn't want me to hear this. I forced myself to stay still, to keep listening, a cold dread seeping into my bones. This was just the beginning. Good. Then let's go over the documents one more time. The transfer of the house has to be ready before he wakes up. If he asks anything, you say he signed everything before the accident. Understood? The house. Our house. The one I had bought with Alistair's inheritance, the one I had so trustingly put in Callum's name because he was my son, because I never imagined such a betrayal. £180,000. All my security, all my future, handed over on a silver platter because a mother trusts, because a mother gives without calculating. Understood, Seraphina replied. Her voice, devoid of sorrow or even concern, was chillingly flat, almost triumphant. It wasn't the sound of a worried wife, but of someone winning a game I didn't even know was being played. And what about the business? The £200,000 in the joint account? I can transfer that too. 200,000. The money I had loaned? No. Given to Callum to set up his import company. The money he'd promised to return, saying, "Mum, it's an investment in our future. You'll see. You'll get it back when the business grows." The business had grown. Profits had flowed. And yet, I was still living in my small apartment, cooking with supermarket specials, turning off lights to save on the electricity bill, while they lived in that huge house with a yard and a pool. While Seraphina bought designer handbags that cost more than my 3 months' rent, while Callum changed luxury cars every 2 years. Technically, it's complicated because you are not listed as the account holder, the man said. And then I recognized his tone, the precise, measured audience. Lawyer. He was a damned lawyer. I could picture him in his expensive suit, his sleek leather briefcase, his clean hands that had never done a day's real work. But if he doesn't wake up in the next few days, or if he wakes up with severe cognitive damage, you can request temporary guardianship. With that, you'll have access to everything. Absolutely everything. The bank accounts, the properties, the investments. If he doesn't wake up. The words hung in the air like sharpened knives, as if it were an acceptable possibility, as if it were even desirable, as if they were discussing the weather. I clapped a hand over my mouth, stifling a scream, fighting the urge to vomit against the cold hospital wall. My legs were shaking so violently I had to brace myself against the doorframe, the wood cold and unforgiving under my fingers. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. It was a nightmare. One of those suffocating nightmares where you run but don't move, where you scream but no sound escapes. "And her?" Serafina asked, and the way she spat the word "her" made me feel like an insect, something to be casually crushed. The meddling old woman. Can she claim anything legally? A chilling silence. The rustle of papers. Legally, no. According to all the records I checked, she is not listed on any official document. Not for the house, not for the business, not for the accounts. Everything is in your husband's name. And if you are the legitimate wife and he is incapacitated, the law favors you completely. She is nothing, she has no rights. She is just the mother-in-law, a spectator. I am nothing. I have no rights. I am just the mother-in-law, a spectator. The words pierced me like ice bullets. 66 years of life, reduced to that. 40 years of marriage to a good man who died too soon. 38 years raising a son I adored more than my own life. All of it culminating in this, in hearing that I was nothing, that I had no right to what I myself had built, what I myself had given with these hands, which were now shaking uncontrollably. Serafina laughed again, that crystalline laugh I had so often mistaken for shyness. How foolish I had been. How blind. How utterly, devastatingly stupid. Perfect. Then we proceed with the original plan. My blood froze. Original plan? I've been giving him the crushed pills in his orange juice in the mornings, just like you instructed. A little more each week. Just half a tablet more. The doctors think it's work stress, accumulated fatigue, his poor eating habits. No one suspects a thing. Absolutely nothing. The world stopped. Silence descended, heavy and absolute, as if someone had pressed pause on the entire universe. The pills. She has been giving him pills. To my son, to Callum, to my baby who had grown in my belly, who had nursed at my breast, who had slept in my arms every night of his first 2 years. My brain, stunned, struggled to process the monstrous reality. This didn't happen in real life. This happened in movies, in sensational news stories from distant lands, in internet forums where you read and think, how awful. Thank goodness something like that would never happen to me. But it was happening. Right now, inches from where I was hiding, a terrified, powerless bat. Here at the hospital, it's even easier, Serafina continued, her voice unnervingly casual, as if she were discussing a cooking recipe or a trick for cleaning tough stains. I can add things to the IV when the nurses are out on their rounds. I have access because I'm the wife. No one questions me. Everyone pities me. They bring me coffee. They tell me to be strong. It's almost comical. In 2 or 3 more days, it will all be over. His heart will simply give out. It will look completely natural. It happens all the time with 42-year-old men who work too hard and don't take care of themselves. The statistics are on our side. 42 years old. My son was 42, and his wife was planning to kill him as casually as she planned a weekend getaway. My legs buckled. I slid down the wall, collapsing onto the cold, hard floor of the empty room. My hands flew to my mouth, pressing so hard I could feel my teeth against my lips to stifle the scream, the retching bile. I couldn't cry. I couldn't make a sound. I couldn't reveal myself. Excellent, the lawyer Julian said. I heard papers being shuffled, the crisp sound a prelude to departure. I'll send you the final documents tonight to your email. Sign them digitally and I'll take care of the rest. By Friday of next week, everything will be in your name. The house, the business, the accounts. And about the other thing, About the hospital plan. I know nothing. Officially, we never had this conversation, is that clear? Crystal clear, Serafina replied, a predatory purr in her voice. You're a genius, Julian. I'll pay you very well when all this is over. Very, very well, Julian. I burned the name into my memory, carving it into the stone of my rage. His footsteps receded, the expensive click-clack of his shoes against the cheap linoleum. But Serafina remained. I could hear her breathing, feel her chilling presence on the other side of that thin wall. And then she spoke. But this time, she wasn't speaking to the lawyer. She was speaking to herself, or perhaps to Callum, lying unconscious, just feet away. Poor fool, she whispered, her voice a concentrated venom that burned to hear. You thought you'd won me over with your cheap flowers and your empty promises. I never loved you, not for a single day. But you had what I needed, a stupid mother with money, a growing business, a paid-off house, and enough naivety to put everything in your name without any legal protection. You were the perfect target. Every word was a slap, every sentence a dagger twisting in my heart. 7 years. They had been married 7 years. 7 years of lies. 7 years of acting. 7 years I had believed my son was happy. All those moments I had misinterpreted rushed into my mind. All those subtle signs I had ignored. The times I would visit, and Serafina would disappear into the bedroom with some flimsy excuse. The times Callum looked tired, pale, but insisted it was just work. The times I offered to help, and he abruptly refused, as if my presence bothered him. Mum, I'm not a kid anymore. I can solve my own problems. But they weren't his problems. It was her. It was the poison he was drinking, unknowingly, every morning with his orange juice. It was the monster sleeping next to him every night, meticulously planning his death while he dreamed of a future that would never come. And as for you, you meddling old lady, Serafina went on, her voice dropping to a low, furious hiss. I realized with horror that even though she couldn't see me, she knew I existed. She knew I was an obstacle in her path. As soon as this is over, I'll take you out of our lives forever. You won't have the right to see even his grave because legally you are nothing. You're just the witch who never accepted me, who always looked at me with suspicion, who always tried to sow discord between Callum and me. That wasn't true. God knew I had tried to accept her with every fibre of my being, because she was the woman my son had chosen, because seeing him happy was the only thing that mattered. I had swallowed 1,000 humiliations. I had smiled when she criticized my clothes, my haircut, my cooking. I had washed her dishes after dinners where I wasn't even served a decent plate, where I ate the leftovers standing up in the kitchen while they dined in the formal dining room. I had bought expensive gifts for her birthdays, for Christmas, for every special occasion, gifts she opened without emotion and left forgotten in some corner. I had taken care of their house when they went travelling, watering the plants, collecting the mail, dusting. I had been the perfect mother and mother-in-law, the one who doesn't bother, the one who doesn't have an opinion, the one who gives and gives and gives without asking for anything in return. And this was how they repaid me, with poison, with theft, with planned murder. I heard her footsteps finally move away, the faint clicking of her heels against the floor. That constant tapping that had once sounded elegant to me now resonated like the ticking of a bomb. She was gone. I heard the soft click of her entering Callum's room and gently closing the door. I stayed there, huddled on the floor of that dark room, shaking like a leaf in the middle of a hurricane. I don't know how much time passed, seconds, minutes, an entire eternity. Time had ceased to make sense. Everything had ceased to make sense. My entire life, all my decisions, all my sacrifices had crumbled in less than 10 minutes, like a house of cards, like a mirage disappearing when you get too close. My hands trembled so violently I had to hug myself to keep from completely falling apart. A cold seeped into my bones, a chill from deep within, a place I didn't know existed. My teeth chattered. My entire body shivered with waves of panic that rose from my stomach to my throat. Callum was dying. Not from an accident, not from bad luck. He was being murdered. His own wife was poisoning him day after day, sip after sip. And no one knew. No one, except that mysterious nurse who had hidden me. That woman who had appeared like an angel, a divine sign, just in time to save me from walking in there, knowing nothing. To save me from confronting Serafina while she played her role as the worried wife. To give me the information I needed, though I didn't know yet what to do with it. What was I supposed to do? Run out screaming? Call the police? Burst into that room and scratch that woman's eyes out with my bare hands? Every option seemed impossible. Every path seemed to lead to a deeper abyss, because she was right about one thing. Legally, I was nothing. I had no proof. Only an overheard conversation. My word against hers. A hysterical old woman against a young, beautiful wife, crying over her sick husband. The door suddenly opened, and I almost had a heart attack. It was her, the nurse. She came in quickly, closed the door behind her, and turned on a small lamp in the corner. The dim light allowed me to see her properly for the first time. Her face was marked by determination, her dark eyes bright but serious, her hair pulled back in a tight, efficient ponytail. Her badge read, Elena Rossi, Specialized Nurse. She looked directly at me and knelt down, taking my frozen hands in her warm ones. Breathe, she said in a firm but kind voice. Breathe deeply. I know you're in shock. I know what you just heard is monstrous. But I need you to calm down. I need you to think clearly because your son doesn't have much time. Her words were a stinging slap that cut through the fog of panic. She was right. I couldn't fall apart. Not now. Later there would be time to cry, to scream, to process all of this. But now, I had to act. I had to save my son. I took a deep, ragged breath once, twice, 3 times. The air came in harsh and cold, but it came in. My heart was still pounding too fast, but at least it was beating. How did you know? I managed to ask, my voice a raw whisper. How did you know that she... Eleanor sighed, sitting on the floor next to me, her back against the wall. I've been taking care of your son in outpatient consultations for 3 weeks. He came in every 5 days with strange symptoms. Extreme fatigue, dizziness, nausea, irregular heartbeat. The doctors couldn't find anything conclusive. They said it was stress. But I've seen these symptoms before. My sister. She died this way 4 years ago. Her husband poisoned her with anticoagulants for months. By the time we realized it, it was too late. Her body was destroyed inside. Her voice broke on the last words, and I saw the ancient pain shining in her eyes. She had lost her sister the same horrible way, and now she was trying to save my son. She was trying to prevent another family from living her same nightmare. I started to suspect a week ago, she continued, her voice regaining its professional cadence. The wife was always too calm, too controlled. She never cried, never despaired. She only asked about the results, the recovery times, the legal procedures if he became incapacitated. Strange questions for someone who supposedly loves her partner. Then I asked to see his old blood tests from 6 months ago, before the symptoms started, and I compared them with the current ones. There's an enormous difference. His levels of certain substances are completely altered in a way that is not natural, in a way that only happens with intentional and sustained poisoning. Eleanor took out her phone and showed me a series of numbers and graphs that I didn't fully understand, but looked terrifying. Red lines spiking wildly, values marked with angry exclamation points. I talked to Dr. Alistair Finch, the head of toxicology. He's the only one I trust here. I showed him my suspicions. He agreed to investigate discreetly, but we needed more solid proof. We needed to catch her in the act. She showed me her phone again, but this time it wasn't graphs. It was a recording app. She was recording. She had recorded the entire conversation between Serafina and the lawyer. Every word, every confession, every monstrous detail of their plan. I knew you would come today. Serafina mentioned it this morning to the other nurses, annoyed because she'd have to deal with the meddling mother-in-law. So I waited in the hallway. I saw you running desperately, and I knew I had to protect you. I had to stop you from going in there without knowing, and I had to get her to confess. And she did. She confessed everything. Tears streamed down my cheeks, uncontrollable. A complex mix of relief, terror, and an infinite, overwhelming gratitude towards this unknown woman who had decided to risk her job, her career, to save my son, to give me a chance to fight. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking into 1,000 pieces. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Elena squeezed my hands tightly. "Don't thank me yet. This is just beginning. Now we have to act fast and intelligently. Dr. Finch is already analyzing your son's IV bag. If he finds evidence of tampering, we will call the police immediately. But we need more. We need to find the pills she's using. We need physical evidence." "Where would she keep them?" I asked, trying to think clearly despite the chaos in my head. "Probably in her purse or in the car. Women like her are arrogant. They feel untouchable. They don't think anyone could discover them." Elena stood up and helped me to my feet. My legs were still shaking, but they held my weight. "Listen to me carefully," she said, looking me directly in the eyes with an intensity that made me feel like anything was possible, that we could win this. "You are going to leave here and act like you know nothing. You're going to go to your son's room. You're going to hug that woman if necessary. You're going to cry. You're going to play the role of the desperate mother, which is what she expects to see. Meanwhile, I'm going to talk to hospital security. I'm going to ask them to check the hallway cameras. I'm going to document every time she enters that room alone. And I'm going to make sure she doesn't go near that IV bag again." I nodded, trying to absorb all the instructions. Act. Pretend. Become what she expected me to be. A foolish, desperate old woman. I could do that. I had been doing that for years without even realizing it. "And one more thing," Eleanor added in a low voice. "Don't tell your son anything yet. If he wakes up, if he can talk, don't tell him what you know. He might not believe you. He might think you're exaggerating, that you're jealous, that you're making things up. Men in love are blind, and she's had 7 years to poison him, not only with pills, but also with lies about you." Those words hurt more than I expected, because I knew they were true. Callum had changed with me in recent years. He had become distant, sharp, annoyed by my presence. How many times had he cancelled lunch? How many times had he forgotten my birthday? How many times had he told me he was too busy to visit? And I had always thought it was work, that it was stress, that it was part of growing up and having your own family. I never imagined it was her whispering poison in his ear every night. She thinks it's his fault that he's sick from working too hard. She's built that narrative perfectly. If you arrive now accusing her of murder, he will defend her, and we will lose our chance to save him. She was right. Everything in me wanted to run into that room and shout the truth to my son, shake him until he woke up and saw the viper he had next to him. But I couldn't. I had to be smart. I had to play the game, at least for now. I wiped the tears with the back of my hand. I smoothed down my coat. I took one last deep breath. "It's all right," I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I felt. "I'm going to do it. I'm going to pretend. But promise me something. Promise me we won't let her win. Promise me my son will live. Promise me that woman will pay for every drop of poison she gave him, for every lie she told, for every second of suffering she caused." Elena looked at me with a fierce determination that reminded me why I had trusted her from the very first moment. "I promise you, Evelyn, that woman will not only lose everything she planned to steal, she will spend the rest of her life in prison. I will personally see to that." She opened the door carefully, peeking out first to make sure the hallway was clear. She gave me a barely perceptible nod, and I left that room that had been my refuge and my hell for the last few minutes. The hallway was more crowded now. There were more nurses, more doctors, more families waiting for news of their loved ones, all caught up in their own tragedies, unaware that a drama surpassing any soap opera was unfolding just feet away. I approached room 312, my steps feeling strangely dislocated, as if my body were moving by instinct, while my mind was still trapped in the horrific conversation I'd just overheard. My hand touched the cold metal of the door. I took one last, shuddering breath and pushed it open. The room was larger than I had imagined, a stark landscape of machines and monitors. Soft beeping sounds, like a heartbeat from a distant, artificial world, filled the air. IV bags hung suspended, glistening like frozen tears in the fluorescent light. And in the center of it all, in that stark white bed, lay my son, Callum. My strong, vibrant Callum, reduced to this fragile form, connected to 1,000 wires and tubes. His skin had an alarming greyish pallor that terrified me. His lips were dry and cracked, and deep, bruised-looking circles shadowed his eyes I'd seen every day of his life, but never like this. This wasn't the robust man who had carried my groceries just 2 months ago. This wasn't the joyous boy who had learned to ride his bicycle in the park, shouting, "Look, Mom, hands free," while I ran behind him, terrified he would fall. This was someone consumed, someone slowly, systematically destroyed from within. And next to his bed, holding his hand with a delicacy I now knew was pure theatre, was her. Serafina. She looked impeccable, as always. Her glossy brown hair was perfectly styled, her makeup discreet but elegant. Her cream-coloured silk dress, undoubtedly costing more than my rent, draped flawlessly. Her green eyes, which I had once thought so beautiful, now, in the cold light of revelation, seemed like the venomous gaze of a snake. When she saw me enter, her expression transformed instantly. Her eyes, as if on cue, welled with tears, her mouth trembled, and she pressed a hand to her chest as if holding back a sob. "Evelyn," she whispered, her voice broken, raw with feigned emotion. She even stood up, extending her arms for a hug. I forced myself to accept that embrace, to put my arms around her, to feel her warm body against mine, and not think that this very body had coldly planned my son's death. Her expensive perfume, an opulent floral scent, filled my nostrils. It smelled to me of flowers and lies. "Thank you for coming," she whispered against my shoulder, her voice thick with practiced vulnerability. "I know you had to take 2 buses. I know it's a long way for you, but I needed you to be here. Callum needs you." Liar. Damn liar. She didn't need me here. She had called me only to keep up appearances, so no one would suspect when he died that she had deliberately kept his mother away. I pulled away from her gently, wiping tears that were completely real, even if she believed they were for the wrong reasons. "What happened, Vitos?" I asked, and my voice sounded exactly as it should have. Terrified, confused, desperate. Serafina sighed dramatically and sat back down next to the bed, resuming her role as the devoted, grieving wife. He was at the office. According to his colleagues, he suddenly turned very pale. He started sweating. He complained of chest pain and that he couldn't breathe well. They thought it was a heart attack. They called an ambulance immediately. She paused, wiping away a perfectly timed, probably fake tear. "The doctors say his heart is very weak, that he's been under a lot of stress, that he hasn't taken care of himself. I've told him 1,000 times to slow down, that money isn't worth more than his health. But you know how he is, stubborn as a mule. Just like when he was a kid, I guess." That comment was like a hook. She was trying to connect with me, to make me feel like we were a team, that we both loved this man and wanted the best for him. What a perfect actress. What a convincing monster. "What are the doctors saying?" I asked, moving closer to the bed and taking Callum's other hand. It was cold, too cold. His fingers didn't respond to my touch. "What should we expect?" "That the next 48 hours are critical. That if he wakes up and there's no brain damage, he can recover with time and treatment." "If he wakes up." Those words again, but this time coming out of her mouth with a feigned sadness that turned my stomach. "But they also said," she continued, her voice dropping to a lower, more intimate tone, as if sharing a secret with me, "that there is a chance he won't wake up, or that he'll wake up but won't be the same. Cognitive damage, they call it. That he might not be able to work again, that he might need permanent care." She was preparing me. She was preparing the ground for when he died, so that I would already have in my head that it was possible, that it was something the doctors had warned about, so that when it happened, no one would question anything. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood in my mouth. But I couldn't explode. I couldn't reveal what I knew. I had to keep acting. "It can't be," I whispered, letting my voice genuinely break. "He's so young. He has his whole life ahead of him. So much left to do." Serafina nodded solemnly, wiping another invisible tear. "I know. That's why I've been praying non-stop. That's why I asked Pastor Graham to come tomorrow to give him a blessing, just in case. Just in case. Just in case he died as she had planned. Just in case the poison finally did its job. Just in case no one noticed in time. But someone had noticed. Elena had noticed. And now I knew too. And we weren't going to let this happen. "Can I stay for a moment alone with him?" I asked, hoping she would say yes. I desperately needed a break from her toxic presence. I needed to breathe without her cloying perfume invading my senses. Serafina hesitated. I saw a shadow of distrust flicker across her face for barely a second before she smoothly reinstated the mask of the understanding daughter-in-law. "Of course, Evelyn. I'm going to go get some coffee. Do you want anything? Some hot tea, maybe?" I shook my head. "No, thank you, dear. I just want to talk to my son." She nodded and left the room with elegant steps, closing the door softly behind her. As soon as she was out, I collapsed onto the bed, hugging Callum with all the care in the world, trying not to disturb any of the delicate wires connecting him to the machines. "Forgive me," I whispered against his hair that smelled of hospital and illness. "Forgive me for not realizing sooner. Forgive me for not protecting you. But I swear on everything I hold dear that I'm not going to let her win. I'm going to get you through this, my love. I'm going to save you, even if it's the last thing I do in this life." I kissed his forehead with infinite tenderness, feeling the cold, clammy skin under my lips. His eyelids trembled slightly, as if somewhere deep in his unconsciousness he could hear me, as if a part of him knew that his mother was there, fighting for him, as she always had. I dried my tears and sat up just as the door opened again. But it wasn't Serafina. It was Eleanor, pushing a cart with medications. She gave me an almost imperceptible nod. There was news. "Mrs. Albright," she said in a professional voice, playing her role perfectly. "Could you come with me for a moment? Dr. Finch wants to speak with you about your son's condition. It will only take a few minutes." I nodded and followed her out of the room, walking down the hallway to a small, empty consultation room. As soon as she closed the door, her expression changed completely. She was no longer just the kind, professional nurse. She was a warrior with crucial information. "We found it," she said without preamble. Dr. Finch analyzed the IV bag and found traces of warfarin. It's a very powerful anticoagulant. In controlled doses, it's used medically, but in the quantities we found, it's designed to cause internal hemorrhaging. The room spun around me. Warfarin, anticoagulant, internal hemorrhaging. My son was bleeding to death, slowly from the inside, and no one had seen it until now. "It was not prescribed for him," Elena continued in a tense voice. "Someone added it to the IV after it was prepared. And there's more. We checked the security cameras from the last 24 hours. There are 3 moments when Serafina enters the room alone when there's no nurse nearby. In 2 of those instances, she is clearly seen manipulating the IV bag. We have visual evidence." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. We had proof. Real proof. Not just the audio recording, but also physical evidence and video. "Did you call the police yet?" I asked in a choked voice. Elena shook her head. "Dr. Finch is doing that right now. But there's a problem. Serafina has legal rights as his wife. If she suspects anything, she can leave before the police arrive. She can destroy evidence. She can contact her lawyer and prepare a defense. We need to keep her here without her suspecting anything until the officers arrive." "How long?" 20 minutes, half an hour maximum. The nearest station is 10 minutes away, but they have to prepare the order, come with specialized detectives. You have to go back in there and act like nothing happened. Keep her busy. Keep her talking. Do whatever it takes. 20 minutes, half an hour. An eternity when you're acting in front of someone who planned to kill your son. But I could do it. I had to do it. "There's something else," Eleanor said, taking out her phone again. "While checking the cameras, we found this. It's from 3 days ago." She showed me a video recorded in stark black and white. It was Serafina in the hospital parking lot, talking animatedly on the phone. There was no audio, but I could see her body language. She was relaxed, almost happy. She was smiling. At one point, she even laughed. "A woman whose husband is gravely ill doesn't laugh like that in the hospital parking lot," Eleanor said with disgust. "We asked the tech department to try to read her lips or recover audio from the environment, but it's difficult. However, there's a moment when she looks directly toward a nearby camera without knowing it's there, and you can clearly read what she says." Eleanor paused the video at that exact moment and zoomed in on the image. Serafina was saying something, and even though there was no sound, it was perfectly clear on her lips. "Soon I'll be free. Soon I'll be free." 3 words that confirmed everything. 3 words that sealed her fate. 3 words that proved this wasn't worried love, but cold calculation. "This will also be given to the police," Elena said, putting away the phone. "It's more ammunition, more evidence that this was premeditated, planned, executed with full awareness of what she was doing." I nodded, feeling something inside me harden, crystallize. I was no longer just the desperate mother. I was no longer the foolish old woman who had been manipulated for years. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone willing to do whatever was necessary to protect her son. "I'm going back," I said with a firmness that surprised even myself. "I'm going to keep her there. And when the police arrive, I want to be present. I want to see her face when she realizes she lost, that her whole performance was in vain, that the stupid old woman wasn't so stupid after all." Elena smiled for the first time since all this had begun. "You are stronger than you think, Evelyn. Your son is lucky to have you." Those words filled me with something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride, purpose, power. I returned to Callum's room with measured steps, controlling my breathing, preparing for my final, most crucial performance. Serafina had already returned and was sitting in the same position, holding Callum's hand, looking at him with that false expression of concern that I could now clearly see for what it truly was: a predator's calculating gaze. "Everything all right?" she asked when I entered, her voice laced with an artificial sweetness. What did the doctor want? "Just to check some paperwork," I lied with surprising ease, my voice calm and steady. "Administrative things, nothing important." I sat in the chair on the other side of the bed and looked directly at her. It was time to play my most important role. "Serafina," I began, my voice soft, almost regretful. "I need to tell you something." She looked up, her emerald eyes cautious, a flicker of suspicion crossing her face. "What is it, Evelyn?" "I've been unfair to you," I continued, the words coming out of my mouth like a slow, sweet poison. "All these years I've been cold, distant. I know you felt it. I know you've tried to get close to me, and I've rejected you again and again." I saw her eyes widen with genuine surprise. This wasn't what she expected. "That's not true," she started to say, a hint of protest in her tone, but I interrupted her. "Yes, it is, and I want to apologize. Because now, seeing my son like this, I realize that life is too short for stupid grudges, too short for silly pride." I leaned forward, reaching across the bed and gently taking her free hand in mine. She tensed slightly, a momentary stiffness, but didn't pull away. "You are the woman my son chose, the woman who makes him happy, and I should have celebrated that instead of feeling jealous. Because that's what it was, you know. Jealousy. Fear of losing him, fear of no longer being the most important woman in his life." Every word was a perfect lie. Every sentence a carefully crafted hook, and she was biting. I could see it in how her eyes softened, how her posture relaxed, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally broken me, finally earned my submission. "Evelyn, Let me finish, please," I said, squeezing her hand, feigning warmth. "If Callum survives this, and he has to survive, I want to start over with you. I want to be the mother-in-law you deserve, the grandmother your future children will need, because you are going to have children, aren't you? You had talked about that." I saw something flicker in her eyes then, discomfort, guilt, perhaps, or simply the annoyance of having to keep acting when she already thought she had won. "Yes," she finally said, a little too quickly. "We had talked about it, after the business stabilized more, after we had more savings." More lies. There had never been plans for children, only plans for early widowhood and easy wealth. "Well, when he gets out of here, I'm going to help you. I have some savings put away. It's not much, but it's something. Maybe I can help you with the down payment for a bigger house, one with a yard for the kids. It would be my gift to you, for the family you're going to build." I saw her eyes gleam for a second, a flash of pure, unadulterated greed. Even now, even in the middle of her monstrous plan, The idea of more money excited her. "You don't have to do that, Evelyn," she said softly, but her eyes screamed the opposite. "Give me more. Give me everything. I want to. It's the least I can do after all these years of distance. Besides, I have no one else. When I die, everything I have will be Callum's anyway, and consequently yours too. Better to enjoy it together while I'm alive." I was selling myself out completely. I was painting myself as the foolish old woman with money that she had always believed I was. And it worked. I could see how she relaxed more and more, how the tension visibly left her shoulders. She believed she had finally broken me. She believed she had finally won my trust. "You are so generous," she said, and even squeezed my hand with what I suppose was meant to look like affection. "Callum is very lucky to have you as a mother." I had to bite my tongue to keep from spitting the truth at her right there. We continued talking about trivialities, invented memories, future plans that would never exist. I played my role as the repentant mother-in-law, and she played hers as the forgiving daughter-in-law. Two actresses on a small clinical stage, waiting for the curtain to fall. I looked at the clock discreetly. 15 minutes had passed. 5 more. Just 5 more minutes and the police would arrive. Just 5 more minutes and all this theatre would end. "You know what I would like?" I said suddenly, as if it had just occurred to me, a spontaneous thought. "I would like it if, when Callum wakes up, the first thing he sees is the two most important women in his life holding hands, united together for him." Serafina smiled, a smile so sweet, so false, so perfectly rehearsed. "I would love that, Evelyn. I would love that." But then, something changed in her expression. A shadow crossed her face. She stiffened and let go of my hand, her eyes darting towards the door. "What is that noise?" she asked, her voice sharp with sudden apprehension. I heard it too then. Voices in the hallway. Many voices. Quick, purposeful footsteps. The unmistakable sound of urgent activity. And then the door burst open. 4 people entered. 2 uniformed police officers, a sharp-suited woman who was clearly a detective, and behind them, Eleanor and Dr. Finch. Serafina jumped to her feet, her eyes wide with unmasked panic. "What is going on?" she demanded, and for the first time since I had known her, her voice sounded genuinely scared. The mask was beginning to crack, revealing the terrified predator beneath. The detective stepped forward, showing her badge. "Serafina Thorne Albright," she stated, her voice calm and authoritative. "I am Detective Anya Sharma. I need you to come with us to answer some questions about your husband's condition." "Questions? What kind of questions? My husband is sick. He had a collapse. What does that have to do with the police?" Her voice rose in pitch, becoming sharper, more desperate. The facade was crumbling rapidly. "We have found evidence that Mr. Callum Albright has been the victim of intentional and sustained poisoning," Detective Sharma continued, her gaze unwavering. "Toxicological analysis shows dangerous levels of warfarin in his system, a substance that was not prescribed to him and was deliberately added to his hospital treatment." The silence that followed was deafening. Serafina remained completely motionless, her mouth slightly open, her eyes darting from the detective to the officers to Eleanor, calculating, desperately searching for a way out. "That's ridiculous," she finally spat, and her voice was now pure ice. The sweetness had disappeared completely, replaced by a raw, furious contempt. "It's a mistake, a medical error. Someone mixed up the medications. That happens all the time in hospitals." "It is not a mistake, Mrs. Thorne Albright," Dr. Finch intervened, stepping forward, his face grim. "We have security camera footage that shows you manipulating your husband's IV bag on 3 different occasions. We have physical evidence of the substance found. And we have this," Elena added, pulling out her phone and playing the recording. Serafina's voice filled the room, clear as water, chillingly casual. I've been giving him the crushed pills in his orange juice in the mornings, a little more each week. The doctors think it's stress. No one suspects anything. Here at the hospital, it's easier. I can add things to the IV. In 2 or 3 more days, it will all be over. I watched as the colour completely drained from her face, as her legs trembled, as she desperately searched for something to say, some excuse, some lie that could save her. But there was nothing. They had caught her completely, meticulously, irrefutably. That recording was taken out of context, she tried, her voice lacking any conviction, a desperate, pathetic attempt. That's not what it looks like. We also have your conversation with your lawyer, Julian Reed, who, by the way, is being interrogated right now, Detective Sharma continued in a firm, professional voice, delivering blow after blow. We have documents showing attempts at fraudulent property transfer. We have your internet search history for undetectable poisons and poisoning symptoms. We have enough evidence to charge you with premeditated attempted murder and fraud. Serafina looked at me then. Her green eyes, once so beautiful, were now filled with pure, unadulterated hatred, burning with a venomous fire. "It was you," she hissed like a cornered snake, every word laced with poison. "You did this, you meddling old woman, you old witch. You couldn't just keep quiet and let things run their course. You had to stick your nose where it didn't belong." I stood up slowly, walking toward her with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. I stood in front of her, looking her directly in the eyes. "I am his mother," I said in a low voice, but it was full of power, a power she had never seen, never anticipated. And a mother always protects her children. Always. My voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the immense gravity of the moment, the satisfaction of justice finally unfolding. "You thought you could fool me. You thought I was a stupid old woman with money. You thought you could steal everything from me, kill my son and get away with it. But you were wrong, Serafina. You were gravely, fatally wrong." "Serafina Thorne Albright," one of the uniformed officers said, taking out the handcuffs, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are under arrest for attempted murder in the 1st degree. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be assigned to you." The handcuffs made that characteristic metallic click as they closed around her wrists. She resisted at first, yelling that it was a mistake, that she was being unfairly accused, that her lawyer would sue them all. But the officers were professional, unyielding. They held her firmly and began to lead her out of the room. Just before crossing the door, she turned to look at me one last time, her face contorted with rage and a chilling, desperate promise. "You think you won," she spat, venom dripping from every syllable. "But he'll never believe you. When he wakes up, I'm going to tell him you made everything up, that you're jealous, that you're crazy, and he's going to believe me. He always believes me." I smiled, not with joy, but with the quiet, profound satisfaction of someone who knows she holds the last, winning card. "It no longer matters what he believes," I said, my voice steady, clear. "Justice does not depend on his opinion. It depends on the evidence, Serafina. And the evidence condemns you." They took her out then, her screams echoing down the hallway until they faded into the distance, swallowed by the sterile silence of the hospital. I stood there, trembling from head to toe, feeling all the adrenaline that had kept me standing for the last hour finally drain away. My legs gave way, and Elena ran to support me, helping me sit down before I fell completely. "It's over," she whispered, hugging me, her touch firm and comforting. "It's over. You did amazingly. You saved your son." But I couldn't celebrate yet. Not fully, because Callum was still unconscious in that bed. Callum was still full of poison. Callum was still fighting for his life. "Doctor," I said in a shaky voice, looking at Dr. Finch, who had approached the bed, already busy with medical charts. "My son, is he going to be okay? Were you able to—" "We started the detoxification treatment as soon as we confirmed the warfarin," he explained in a reassuring voice, his gaze kind. "High doses of vitamin K to counteract the anticoagulant, fresh plasma transfusions. His body is young and strong. He has very good chances of a full recovery, Evelyn. Very good chances." It wasn't a guarantee, but it was hope. And hope, after the abyss I'd stared into, was more than I had had just 2 hours ago. I approached Callum's bed and took his hand again, squeezing it tightly. "Fight, my love," I whispered. "Fight for your life. Your mum already did her part. Now it's up to you." The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I didn't leave the hospital. I couldn't. Eleanor, my extraordinary nurse, managed to get me a special pass to stay in Callum's room 24 hours a day. She brought me coffee, lukewarm sandwiches that I barely tasted, and extra blankets when I shivered from the cold in the early morning hours. She had become more than a nurse. She was my guardian angel, my unexpected savior, the sister I never had. Dr. Finch came every few hours, his presence a quiet comfort, checking Callum's vital signs, adjusting medications, and patiently explaining every small change in his condition to me. "His levels are improving," he would tell me, showing me graphs I barely understood, but that sounded like celestial music. "The treatment is working. His body is responding. It's just a matter of time." Time. That word, once synonymous with dread, had now become my religion, my mantra of hope. Every minute that passed was a minute further from the poison. Every hour was a small, hard-won victory against the death that Serafina had planned so coldly. I sat next to his bed and talked to him. I told him stories from when he was a child, the time he got lost in the supermarket, and I found him crying in the cereal aisle, his first day of school when he clung to my leg, unwilling to let go. I recounted Christmases, birthdays, the small, beautiful moments that build a life. "You have to wake up," I told him over and over, my voice hoarse from lack of sleep and the constant silent vigil. "You have to wake up because there is still so much to live for, so much you haven't done. You can't leave like this. You can't leave me like this." Sometimes his eyelids trembled. Sometimes his fingers moved slightly, and I clung to those signs like a castaway to a piece of driftwood. Detective Sharma came to see me on the second day. She brought a truly decent coffee, not the watery kind from the hospital machine, and sat with me in that silent room. "I wanted to update you on the case," she said in a professional but kind voice. "Serafina is being held without bail. The charges are serious. Attempted murder, fraud, tampering with evidence. Her lawyer, Julian Reed, is cooperating with us in exchange for a reduced sentence. He has confessed to the entire plan, the property transfers they were preparing, the falsified documents, everything." I nodded, feeling a dark satisfaction I didn't know I was capable of feeling. "How much time will she serve in prison? If we convict her on all counts, we are talking about between 25 and 30 years minimum," Detective Sharma replied, her voice firm. "And with the evidence we have, it's almost impossible for her to be acquitted. 25 to 30 years, an entire lifetime. Enough time for her manipulative beauty to fade behind bars. Enough time for her to pay for every drop of poison she gave my son, for every lie she told, for every life she had attempted to shatter." "There's something else you should know," Anya continued, pulling a folder from her briefcase. We investigated her past. Seraphina Thorne is not her real name. Her name is Veronica Shaw. My breath caught. Another layer of deception. Another carefully constructed lie. She has a record in 2 different countries, France and Germany, for fraud and scams. She marries men with money, manipulates them into signing over their assets, and then disappears. Your son was not her first victim. He was the 4th. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. 4th. Callum was her 4th victim. The others? I couldn't finish the question. Anya shook her head. The other 3 survived, but they lost everything. Houses, businesses, savings. One of them tried to report her, but she had been so careful with the paperwork, so adept at obscuring her tracks, that they couldn't prove anything. He declared bankruptcy and fled to another region, utterly ruined. She changed her name, changed her appearance, and started over with your son. She finally made a mistake. She was too ambitious, too impatient. And thanks to that, we caught her. She showed me photos. Seraphina with different hair colors. Seraphina with a different style. But always the same cold eyes, the same calculating smile. These men want to testify, Anya said. They want to tell their stories. They are going to help build a pattern of behavior that will make it impossible for her to claim this was a misunderstanding or a mistake. She is a professional predator, Evelyn, and she is finally going to pay for everything. I looked at my son sleeping in that bed and felt a surge of gratitude mixed with a potent, simmering rage. Gratitude because I had saved him in time. Rage because I had been so close to losing him, so close to her winning. Thank you, I told Anya. Thank you for taking this seriously, for investigating, for not letting her get away with it. She squeezed my hand. It's my job, but more than that, it's my duty. Women like her cannot continue destroying lives. Your bravery in acting fast, in trusting Eleanor, in staying calm, that is what truly saved your son. You are a hero, Evelyn. Hero. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like an exhausted mother who had done the only thing she knew how to do, protect her son. That was all. On the 3rd day, just as the sun began to stream through the room's window, filling it with a golden, warm light, it happened. Callum's fingers moved. It wasn't an unconscious tremor, it was a deliberate movement. He squeezed my hand. I shouted for the nurses, a cry of pure, unadulterated joy, without letting go of his hand. Eleanor came running, followed by another nurse, and then Dr. Finch. He's waking up, the doctor said, checking his eyes with a small flashlight. Callum, if you can hear me, squeeze your mother's hand again. And he did. He squeezed my hand harder this time. Tears rolled down my cheeks uncontrollably. My love, I whispered over and over. You're here. You're alive. You're okay. His eyelids began to move slowly, as if they weighed tons. They opened. His eyes, those warm brown eyes I had seen since the day he was born, looked at me confusedly at first, lost, but then they focused. He recognized me. Mum, he whispered in a hoarse, barely audible voice. That single word broke all the barriers I had built. I collapsed onto the bed, crying against his chest, feeling his hand weakly rise to touch my hair. I'm here, I said between sobs. I'm here, my love. You are safe. Everything is going to be all right. Dr. Finch gave us a few minutes before starting the examinations. He checked his reflexes, his vision, his cognitive ability. He asked simple questions: name, date of birth, where he lived. Callum answered everything correctly, though slowly, searching for the words. There is no apparent brain damage. the doctor finally announced with a triumphant smile. It's a miracle considering the amount of toxins in his system, but he's young, strong, and the treatment came just in time. Just in time, thanks to Eleanor. Thanks to that extraordinary nurse who had trusted her instinct, who had seen what no one else saw. Callum looked around the room confused. "What happened?" he asked, his voice still weak. "Why am I here? The last thing I remember is being at the office and feeling sick." And then nothing. I sat in the chair next to his bed, taking his hand in mine. This was the moment I had dreaded, the moment to tell him the truth. The truth about the woman he had married, the woman who had slept next to him for 7 years while planning his death. "Callum," I began in a soft but firm voice, "there's something you need to know. Something terrible. But I need you to listen to me until the end. Can you do that?" He nodded, though I could see the fear growing in his eyes. Fear of what he was about to hear. Fear of a truth he probably already suspected in some deep, unacknowledged corner of his mind. I told him everything. From the moment I ran to the hospital until Elena hid me. I told him about the conversation I overheard, about Serafina and the lawyer, Julian, about the poison in his orange juice, about the warfarin in his IV bag, about the 7 years of lies, about the other 3 victims, about the plan to take everything and leave him to die as if it were just another accident. I watched as his face went through every possible emotion. Disbelief at first, then denial, then anger, then overwhelming pain, and finally a sadness so deep it broke my heart to see it. "It can't be," he whispered when I finished, his voice barely audible. "Serafina, no. She loves me. She has always been there for me. She took care of me when I was tired. She prepared my juice every morning. She—" He stopped. He heard his own words. The juice every morning. Exactly as she had confessed in the recording. "Do you want to hear the recording?" I asked softly. "Nurse Elena recorded everything. Her complete confession." He shook his head violently. "No. No, I don't want to. I can't." He cried. Then my adult son, my strong, successful man, cried as I hadn't seen him cry since he was a child. He cried for the betrayal, for the lost years, for the love he had believed was real and never existed. I climbed onto the bed carefully and hugged him as I had done 1,000 times when he was little, when he fell off his bike, when a bully bothered him at school, when his first love rejected him. I had always been there to pick up the pieces. And here I was again. "I'm sorry," I said, even though I wasn't the one who should apologize. "I'm sorry you had to go through this. I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner. I'm sorry I was so blind." "It wasn't your fault," he murmured against my shoulder, his voice muffled. "I didn't see anything either. I lived with her. I slept next to her. I told her my dreams, my fears, my plans, and all the time." He didn't finish the sentence. There was no need. "I loved her, Mum," he continued after a while. "Or at least I loved the person I thought she was. How could I have been so stupid? How did I not see the signs? Because that's how people like her operate," I said softly, stroking his hair. "They are experts in manipulation, in making you believe exactly what they want you to believe. You weren't stupid, my love. You were human. You trusted because that's what good people do. They trust." We stayed like that for a long time. Mother and son, survivors of a storm that had almost destroyed both of us. "Mum," he finally said, pulling back a little to look me in the eyes, his own still red-rimmed and swollen. "She said things about you, didn't she? All these years. She said things that made me pull away from you." I nodded slowly. I didn't want to put more burden on him. But I needed the truth to be finally, irrevocably between us. Yes, I guess so. You started to change with me about 3 years ago. More distant, colder, as if my presence bothered you. He closed his eyes in shame. She told me you were controlling, that you wanted to separate us, that you spoke badly about her behind her back, that you gave her expensive gifts just to make her feel bad, to show that she couldn't afford those luxuries. Every time I mentioned visiting you, she would cry. She would say you made her feel inferior, that you would never accept her. And I believed her. God, I was such an idiot. No, I said firmly. You weren't an idiot. You loved your wife, and you wanted to protect her. That makes you a good person, not an idiot. She twisted that love. She used it as a weapon against you, against us. I treated you so badly, Mom. I cancelled lunches. I forgot your birthday. I made you feel unwelcome in my own house. In the house you bought with your money. My God. His voice broke again. How can you even look at me now? How can you be here after everything I put you through? I took his face in both hands, forcing him to look at me, my gaze unwavering. Because you are my son. Because I love you more than my own life. Because a mother doesn't abandon. No matter how much it hurts, no matter how many times she is rejected, she will always, always be there when her son needs her. He cried again, and I cried with him, for the lost years, for the unspoken words, for all the times I had wanted to call him and didn't, because I knew it would annoy him. For all the nights I had gone to bed wondering what I had done wrong, for all the unnecessary pain we had both carried. Detective Sharma came later that day to take Callum's statement. It was difficult. He had to remember details he would rather forget. The mornings he woke up feeling weak, the times Serafina insisted he take his vitamins, that he drink her special juice. The nights she told him he looked tired, that he was working too hard, that he needed more rest. Everything had been part of the plan. Every gesture of concern was actually another step towards his death. There's something else you need to know, Anya said when she finished taking notes. The house that is in your name, the one your mother bought. Serafina had initiated the transfer procedures, but we stopped them in time. The property is still yours. We also froze all the bank accounts and blocked any access she had. Your money is safe. Callum looked at me with an expression of absolute horror. Mum, your money, Dad's inheritance, the £180,000, I almost lost everything. But you didn't lose it, I said firmly. We saved it. Both of us saved it. And about the business, Anya continued, the £200,000 your mother invested, plus the accumulated profits, everything is protected. Serafina had no legal rights to any of it, because even though it was in accounts in his name, you never made her the official beneficiary. It was an oversight on your part, but that oversight saved you from losing everything. An oversight. Or maybe deep down, Callum had always known something wasn't right. Maybe a part of him never completely trusted her. We will need you to testify at the trial, the detective said. I know it's difficult, but your testimony is crucial. You are the direct victim. Your word carries weight. Callum nodded, though pale. I'll do it. I want her to pay. I want her to pay for everything. The following days were of slow but steady recovery. Callum improved every day. Colour returned to his face. Strength returned to his muscles. The doctors were amazed at how quickly he healed once the toxins were eliminated from his system. Elena came to visit him every shift. They had become friends in that strange, profound bond that forms between people who go through something traumatic together. I owe you my life, Callum would tell her every time. To you and my mother. I was just doing my job, she always replied modestly. But we both knew she had done much more than that. She had risked her career. She had trusted her instinct when everyone else ignored it. She had been brave when it would have been easier to stay quiet. A week after waking up, Callum was finally strong enough to sit in a chair by the window. He looked out toward the city that kept moving without knowing the drama that had unfolded in this very room. "Mum," he said, without turning to look at me, "when I get out of here, I want to make things right. I want to give you back your money, every single penny, with interest." "You don't need to, my darling," I started, but he raised his hand. "Yes, I do need to. I need to make it right. I need to show you that I am not that man who ignored you for 3 years, that I am not that son who forgot where he came from. I need to show myself too." I walked over and sat in the chair next to him. "You don't have to show me anything. You already did. You survived. You're here. That's all I need." "But I need more," he insisted, finally turning to look at me, his eyes filled with a new, raw determination. "I need to get myself back. The man I was before her. The son you were proud to raise. You'll help me find him again, won't you?" I took his hand and squeezed it hard. "Always, my love. Always." The trial was 6 months later. 6 months in which Callum recovered completely, physically and emotionally. 6 months in which he slowly, painstakingly, closed wounds he thought would never heal, in which he learned to trust again, starting by trusting himself. 6 months in which our relationship was rebuilt from the foundations, stronger than before, more honest, more loving than ever. We entered that courthouse together, arm in arm. He in a charcoal grey suit that made him look like the successful, strong man he truly was. I in an olive green dress that I had bought especially for the occasion, not out of vanity, but because I wanted to look strong. I wanted her to see that she hadn't been able to destroy me. Serafina was sitting at the defense table. She looked different. Her once glossy hair had lost its shine. Her skin looked pale and sallow under the harsh artificial court lights, but her eyes were still the same, cold, calculating, devoid of remorse. When she saw us enter, something dark crossed her face. Pure hatred. There were no more masks. There were no more performances. This was the real Veronica Shaw, the predator hiding behind the false name of Serafina. The prosecutor presented the evidence methodically, relentlessly. The audio recordings where she confessed everything, her chillingly casual plans. The security videos showing her manipulating the IV bag with detached precision. The toxicological analyses, stark and damning. The testimonies of the other 3 men she had previously scammed, painting a horrifying pattern of calculated predation. Every piece of evidence was another nail in her legal coffin. Elena testified, calm and resolute, about how she had noticed the symptoms, about her suspicions, about the investigation she had done, risking her entire career. Dr. Finch explained in precise medical terms how the warfarin had been systematically destroying Callum's body from the inside. How, without Elena's intervention, he would have died in a matter of days. Detective Sharma presented all the evidence of the fraud, the falsified documents, Veronica's extensive criminal history under her multiple identities. It was devastating. One by one, the pillars of her defense crumbled into dust. Her lawyer tried to argue that the recordings had been obtained illegally, that the testimonies were circumstantial, that everything could be explained as a series of tragic misunderstandings. But no one believed him. The evidence was too solid, too clear, too damning. Then they called me to the stand. I walked slowly, my heart pounding, but my resolve steady. I sat in that hard wooden chair, looking at the jury, the judge, the entire courtroom full of strangers who had come to witness this real-life drama. "Mrs. Albright," the prosecutor began, his voice kind, Can you tell us in your own words what you heard that day at the hospital? And I told him everything. From my desperation running down that hallway, my heart a fractured mess, to the moment Elena hid me. From every venomous word that had come out of that woman's mouth, to the chilling, gut-wrenching moment I understood that my son was being slowly, deliberately murdered. My voice broke several times. Tears rolled down my cheeks uncontrollably. Real, painful tears for the past, the present, the terror. But I kept talking, my voice unwavering in its purpose. Because my son deserved to be heard. Because the other victims deserved justice. Because no other mother should ever have to go through this hell. And how did you feel when you heard that your son was being poisoned? The prosecutor asked, his voice gentle. I looked directly at Veronica, who sat motionless at the defense table, her eyes still burning with resentment. I felt like the world was ending, I said, my voice rising with a strength I hadn't known I possessed. But I also felt rage, a rage I didn't know existed inside me. Rage that someone could be so wicked, so calculating, so cold. Rage for having trusted her, for having welcomed her into my family, for having believed she loved my son when all the time she only saw numbers, dollars, property, power. Is there anything else you wish to say, Mrs. Albright? The prosecutor asked. Yes, I said firmly, my voice echoing through the silent courtroom. I want the jury to know that this woman is not the victim of a misunderstanding. She is a professional predator. She has deliberately destroyed lives. And if you don't stop her here, she will continue to do it. The next victim could be someone else, another mother's son. And perhaps that mother won't be as lucky as I was. Perhaps no one will notice the signs in time. Please don't give her that opportunity. The defense attorney tried to discredit me in the cross-examination. He suggested I was jealous of my son's relationship, that I had made everything up out of spite, that the recordings could have been edited. But every question he asked, I answered with a calmness and a truth that seemed to disarm him. Then they called Callum. Seeing him walk toward that stand, strong and alive when he should have been dead, was one of the most powerful moments of my life. He testified about the years of marriage, about how she had systematically isolated him from me, about the symptoms he had ignored, thinking they were stress, about the orange juice she lovingly prepared for him every morning, about how he felt worse and worse. But she convinced him that he just needed rest, that the doctors were exaggerating, that everything would be fine. Did you love her? The prosecutor asked. I loved the person I thought she was, Callum replied firmly, his gaze steady, devoid of his earlier pain. But that person never existed. It was a mask, a character designed to manipulate me, to steal from me, to kill me. And now, Mr. Albright, do you feel anything for her now? Callum looked directly at Veronica for the first time since the trial began. A long, silent moment passed. Pity, he finally said, his voice quiet but resonant. Pity that someone can live like that, without real love, without genuine connections, just calculating, always calculating. What an empty life that must be. I saw something flicker in Veronica's eyes. For the first time since everything began, I saw her genuinely affected, not by guilt, but by the quiet contempt in Callum's voice. The contempt of someone who no longer feared her, who had truly moved beyond her poisonous grasp. The jury deliberations lasted less than 3 hours. When they returned, the judge asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor," the foreman replied, his voice clear. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of aggravated fraud, guilty. On the charge of falsification of documents, guilty. On all charges presented, we find her guilty." The gavel fell. The sharp sound echoed in that courtroom like thunder. Veronica didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just sat there, rigid, as the officers approached. The sentence was 32 years in prison, with no possibility of parole before serving 20. 32 years. Enough time for all her beauty to fade away. Enough time for her to pay for every life she had destroyed, for every ounce of pain she had inflicted. As they were taking her out of the room, she stopped next to our table. She looked at Callum and me with those green eyes, now filled with nothing but pure, undiluted venom. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice a low, furious threat. "I'll find a way out. And when I do, you won't—" "And even if you did," Callum interrupted her, his voice absolute calm, "I don't care anymore. You no longer have any power over me. You're just another criminal on her way to prison, Veronica. Nothing special. Nothing memorable. Nothing." It was the final blow, watching her ego crumble, watching the stark reality of her situation finally catch up with her. They took her out then, her venomous stare fixed on me until she was out of sight. It was the last time we saw her. Outside the courthouse, a group of reporters was waiting for us. Callum had decided to speak publicly about what had happened. He wanted to warn others. He wanted his story, our story, to serve a purpose. "My name is Callum Albright," he began, his voice strong and clear in front of the cameras. "And I almost died at the hands of the woman I married. But I am here today thanks to 3 incredible people: Elena Rossi, a nurse who trusted her instinct; Dr. Alistair Finch, who took her concerns seriously; and my mother, Evelyn Albright, who never gave up on me, even though I had foolishly pushed her out of my life." He searched for me in the crowd and extended his hand. I walked over and took it, my eyes blurring with tears of immense pride. "Mum," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "forgive me for the lost years, for the ignored calls, for the forgotten birthdays, for making you feel like you weren't important. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "You already did, my love," I said, tears streaming down my face. "You survived. That's all I ever needed." 3 months later, we sold the house. That sprawling, luxurious property I had bought with so much love, and which had become a symbol of betrayal, now only contained bitter memories. With that money, Callum bought a new apartment, smaller but full of light, its windows overlooking a vibrant city park. He also formally transferred a significant portion of his business back into my name, ensuring my financial security for life. And with the rest, we did something I had never imagined. We created a foundation. It's called the Sentinel Trust, dedicated to helping families who have been victims of sophisticated fraud or insidious domestic abuse. We provide free legal advice, psychological support, temporary shelter if necessary. Elena Rossi is a crucial part of the team. She helps identify subtle signs of poisoning or abuse in medical settings, training other nurses to trust their instincts, to look beyond the surface, to be the vigilant sentinels that Callum and I so desperately needed. In the first year alone, we helped 17 families, 17 stories that could have ended in tragedy, but found help in time. And I, Evelyn, the old woman they thought was invisible, became the voice of those who couldn't speak. I give talks in hospitals, in community centers, anywhere that invites me. I tell my story, our story, without shame, because the shame is not mine. It belongs to the predators who hide behind charming smiles and carefully constructed lies. I speak of the insidious nature of emotional manipulation, the importance of listening to your gut, and above all, the unwavering power of a mother's love. Today, as I write these lines from my new apartment, a beautiful, light-filled space with a partial ocean view, one I bought for myself with my own recovered savings, I feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My son comes over for lunch every Sunday. We cook together. We laugh together. We plan the future together. We made up for lost time, not by dwelling in the past, but by diligently building something new, something honest, something truly meaningful. And when I look back at that horrible night in the hospital, at that moment when I heard murder plans whispered in a sterile hallway, I no longer feel just pain or terror. I feel gratitude. Because that night, I discovered something about myself that I didn't know existed. I discovered that I am stronger than I thought, braver than I imagined, more powerful than anyone, including myself, had ever believed. I am Evelyn Albright. I am 66 years old. And finally, after a lifetime of giving, I learned to fight. And I won.